But Bubbles had been hit over the head.
It was hit when he did something wrong. Chimps shouldn't be taken from their mothers and they shouldn't be used in entertainment.
He bit me.
The celebrities sitting in our audience.
Michael Jackson, probably the most famous musician of all time. There is no disputing his legendary impact on the world of music, but he remains one of the most controversial figures in pop. Amongst the numerous shocking revelations about Jackson, perhaps one of the most intriguing and often ignored stories is the bizarre and tragic tale of his pet chimp, Bubbles. So to truly understand Bubbles' story, we really have to go back to Jackson's childhood. From a very young age, Michael Jackson had always had a keen interest in animals and a love for his pets. Their father had loved dogs, and they had had many different animals, including a dog named Frisky. Now, Jackson's childhood was less than normal, as his father had primed him and his brothers for fame from a very young age, relentlessly rehearsing them for up to 15 hours a day and making them perform most nights. His father was more of a business manager to him than a loving parent, and he wouldn't even let him call him Dad, and instead asked that he refer to him as Joseph.
Practiced us with a belt in his hand, and if you miss a step, expect to be
He didn't have a lot of friends, and he didn't even go to school with other kids. This strict form of parenting and childhood trauma led Jackson to develop issues with trusting and connecting with other humans. And so animals became a great comfort to him, as it would allow him to form loving relationships without the burden of being criticized, ridiculed, or pressured. Spending time with his pets was a huge distraction from his music. Now, it wasn't long before Jackson had even more exotic pets, pythons, boa constrictors, to name a few. But the more famous that Michael became, the more lonely he began to feel. He once described himself as being one of the loneliest people in the world. He even said himself he felt like an animal in a cage. Around this time, he began to distrust humans even further, as it became really difficult for him to tell who was just using him for his fame or who actually really did like him for his true personality. He also became extremely interested in the idea of having a pet that he could actually vocally communicate with. According to his sister Latoya, his mother had always said, "You can have whatever animal you want, but you can never have a monkey." Jackson finally managed to change his mother's mind though, when he convinced her to let him have the cutest little baby chimp that he believed was born in a research lab and passed on to him to give it a very special new life. The sad truth is, however, that Bubbles' life was kind of doomed from the start, because although he was born in a biomedical laboratory, he had been taken away from his mother as an infant and passed on to a celebrity trainer, who then finally sold him to Michael for reportedly around $65,000. Now, even in the 1980s, chimps were known to be wild and dangerous animals, and were definitely not recommended as pets. So Jackson was already making a big mistake by bringing the chimp into his home. As soon as Michael got Bubbles, he was absolutely enamored by him. He spoiled him by dressing him up in the latest designer gear and even referred to him as his child. The chimp was described by the family as amazingly polite and sweet, and he very soon just became part of the family. Bubbles was remarkably human-like. You could talk to him and he would nod. He would follow you everywhere, just like a little kid. The Jacksons' cooks were said to have loved Bubbles and even let him stir the food. He would sit at the family table and eat with a knife and fork. He even knew how to go and get himself some ice cream. But astonishingly, he even knew how to go and take his pajamas out of a drawer and put them on and get ready for bed, just like a human child would. And then he would join Micheal by the side of the bed by getting on his knees and praying, just like he had taught him. He was even said to have shown him how to do his infamous moonwalk and claimed he was potty trained. However, the housekeepers disagreed with this and said that they actually had to clean feces that had been hurled at the bedroom wall. Bubbles became a huge comfort to Jackson. The two of them became inseparable, and Micheal was like a surrogate mother to the young chimp. Now, this is where things become a bit weird. According to LaToya, Micheal actually became utterly obsessed with the idea of being able to actually have real vocal communication with Bubbles. He began to study human and chimp anatomy and even acquired a human brain in a jar to ponder at. He actually asked doctors if he could give Bubbles an operation and could he give him vocal cords because he wanted to know what his thoughts were and what he was actually saying.
Why did you give it vocal cords?
Unfortunately though, to Jackson's dismay, but perhaps Bubbles' best fortunes, Micheal's dream to make Bubbles talk would never actually come true. Bubbles began doing a lot of guest appearances on TV and having encounters with many different celebrities. He even drank green tea with the Mayor of Osaka and Elizabeth Taylor, partied with Bon Jovi, and even sat in on Jackson's recording of a duet with Freddie Mercury, to which Freddie stormed out of the recording after telling friends, "I'm not performing with a fuck chimp." It was during this time that people began to suspect Jackson of using the chimp for publicity and not just as a personal companion, as showbiz writers claimed that Jackson would give the press lots of information about Bubbles in order to divert them from writing about himself, as he actually really disliked public attention. It was during this time that Jackson earned himself the nickname Wacko Jacko by the press, which is a name that he was said to despise. Some of the press even began to spread false stories and later claim wrongfully that the chimp had died. Now, it's round about this time that things began to take a dark turn. Bubbles' sweet and submissive nature didn't last long, because as he began to get older, he started to develop signs of aggression, and it became increasingly more difficult to control his behavior. According to LaToya, he became extremely strong, and his slaps became very powerful, even to the point that they could knock you out. He started to become very naughty and would push stuff off tables and begin to jump on the chandeliers to swing on. At nearly 4 years old, he was beginning to become an adult, and it was causing him a lot of trouble. The trainers were trying their best, but they weren't able to fully control him. Now, this is actually very common behavior when chimpanzees enter adolescence, as it's often a reason why it is highly recommended against keeping them as pets. It is not uncommon for chimps to actually viciously attack their owners when entering their adulthood years. Rumours of this behaviour led to an article in the National Enquirer, which it claimed that Micheal believed that Prince was using ESP to turn Bubbles against him. Bubbles has been acting strangely the past few weeks. He bared his teeth and acted like he was going to bite Micheal, revealed a mutual friend of the two singers. Nextly, the chimp went on rampages around Michael's home for 3 straight days, knocking things over and terrorizing everyone. Bubbles is defenseless and Prince is turning him against me. What kind of sicko would mess with a monkey? However, it is claimed that Jackson actually found the story hilarious and his staff had actually never seen him laugh so much. Now this is where things get very disturbing, as Rashida Jones and Ron Newt have both publicly shared stories in which they mention Bubbles biting children, in which Ron even states that Michael responded to this behaviour by hitting him with an 8-piece.
Dad, he bit me!
So Michael Jackson beat up Bubbles.
Hit him with 8-piece.
This is sadly not the only allegation that the chimp was physically assaulted whilst under Jackson's care. February of 2019, an NME article with Dame Jane Goodall, who is one of the world's most foremost primatologists, made claims that Bubbles had been punched in the face and kicked in the stomach whilst living at the Neverland Ranch.
Michael said, once he was hit across the room.
In the ITV documentary Searching for Michael Jackson's Zoo with Ross Kemp, Goodall claims that Bubbles was hit across the room to discipline him. She also said that Jackson looked happy when she showed him footage of monkeys in lab cages, terrible conditions, and circuses. Goodall claims that despite the image of Jackson pampering the chimp with a luxury lifestyle, there were occasions where he was frequently attacked, and that Michael lost his temper when she presented him with that theory.
I said, well, Michael, did you think that was all right? And he said, no, not really. Bubbles is still alive. When he was with Michael Jackson, he was being beaten.
Goodall doesn't specifically accuse Jackson himself of the abuse, but there are others who also claim that they have witnessed it. Jack Gordon, LaToya Jackson's ex-husband, states that he actually personally witnessed the star attacking the chimp. He even says that he saw Michael punch Bubbles in the face and kick him in the stomach. He even claims that Michael used to say, "He doesn't feel it, he's a chimpanzee."
He looked at me and he said, you wouldn't approve of a chimp being hit over the head, would you?
When Bubbles began to get out of control, LaToya describes how trainers came to the house and were highly disturbed by the way that Bubbles was being treated.
And they were highly disturbed with Bubbles, the way we treated him.
And they were actually told, you don't treat a chimpanzee this way.
That this was not normal. You don't treat a chimpanzee this way.
So instead of removing Bubbles and sending him to an animal sanctuary, Jackson now decided that it was time instead to leave the family home. In 1988, Jackson moved to a new place which he named Neverland. He started a private zoo here with tigers, leopards, alligators, giraffes, and even an elephant. Bubbles was now primarily kept with his trainer, but still had access to every room at Neverland, where it was said that he slept in a crib in Jackson's bedroom and ate candy in the movie theatre. There are unfortunately many further allegations of mistreatment and neglect within the Neverland Ranch. In the Ross Kemp documentary previously mentioned, it was unfortunately revealed that there were several accidents at Neverland causing the deaths of several animals. In fact, Jackson's personal friend and portrait artist, David Nordell, who visited Neverland several times, told Ross Kemp that Jabbar, the giraffe, sadly died in an accident as the barn doors came loose and the door came around and broke his neck. This isn't the only time that one of Jackson's pets has succumbed to bad fortunes, as LaToya even tells of the time that one of his parrots was eaten by a boa constrictor who found a gap in the bird cage, and a llama named Snow White died after being viciously attacked by dogs. Jackson is also accused in the documentary of buying 2 baby elephants named Ali and Baba from a convicted animal torturer, and is criticized about the controversial use of a bull hook in videos of the Neverland elephants taken at the ranch. There is a bull hook in the photo of Michael Jackson receiving his gift of an elephant from Elizabeth Taylor, and unfortunately a photo does exist of baby elephants also being chained up in the Neverland barn. Baba is still with the anonymous trainer, but it is claimed that Michael got rid of Ali as the cost of keeping him was too big. Jackson had also been told after an inspection to buy Jabbar the giraffe a bigger enclosure. Now, Jackson's former bodyguard and personal friend, Matt, criticizes Kemp's documentary and discusses it in a podcast, which you can watch on his YouTube channel. I would recommend you give it a watch if you would like to hear the other side of the story and a more positive account of life at the Neverland Resort. Matt does admit that one of the chimpanzees tried to bite him, but also claims that the tigers they acquired were actually spotted being mistreated in New York, and Jackson actually rescued them. Brings up an interesting story of when Michael stopped a concert midway through in South Africa in order to help a grasshopper be removed from the stage, and claims that the singer loved animals so much that he wouldn't even moonwalk over a bug. Rob Swenson, the creator and designer of the Neverland Park, tells a story in which Michael felt his lion was lonely, so he would sit and sing a cappellas to him to keep him company. Now, despite trying to share this as proof of Jackson's amazing bond with the animals, arguably this could show that Jackson himself was perhaps aware of the negative impact on keeping a lion in captivity. Jane Goodall, again, when asked about Neverland, claims that the conditions were terrible. There were 2 dressed up chimps who lived separately who came out to be photographed, and there was a poor little bear in a circular cage, crying, that shouldn't have left its mother, and people were bending over to stroke it. She claims that the whole situation was horrendous. And Carol Davis, the former director of Companion Animal Protection Society, claims that Neverland was no fairy tale for the animals living there. No fairy tale at all. She encourages viewers in the documentary to have the opinion that one can be a real fan of Michael Jackson's fantastic music and also hold in one's head the idea that Michael Jackson hated animals. It's wrong to own wild exotic pets. They don't belong in captivity, and he made it look like it was okay to do so. He was wrong, she said. He collected animals like someone collects exotic cars. It was about flaunting his money. Moving back to the story of Bubbles' fate, Jackson didn't want to remove him from public appearances, and some people even began to speculate that he was using younger chimps and pretending that they were him, a claim made by Patty Reagan, the founder of the Center of Great Apes. In 2003, things got too much as Bubbles grew to 12 stone, and he was moved to an animal sanctuary after there were fears that he might attack Jackson's newborn son, Prince Michael II. During this time, Jackson was said to have bought 2 new baby chimpanzees, one named Max and another named Action, despite knowing the consequences that would accompany it. Bubbles then sadly got pushed to the side and started living full-time with his trainer, Bob Dunn, at his ranch in California. To which Dunn said, "Bubbles is an adult chimp and a wild animal. We don't let him out to play." Rick Skye, a show business writer, said in the Untold story of Michael Jackson and Bubbles, "Once Bubbles stopped being like a child, playful, being cute. In fact, once he grew up, Jackson lost interest in him. And that's a very, very telling thing about Jackson's own psychology. He fell out of love with Bubbles because he'd grown up." In 2004, Bubbles was moved once again to the Center of Great Apes in Florida after the closure of Dunn's facility. It is here that Bubbles lives to this very day, now weighing 185 pounds at 40 years old. Now, there is disputing information on whether Jackson visited Bubbles after he moved away. The Independent reports that he visited him several times before his death, and according to the LA Times, Dunn claims that he did visit whilst within his care. The Washington Times, however, claims that he did not visit Bubbles again once he was moved to the sanctuary in Florida, where he lives to this very day. This has led to many people taking the stance that Jackson abandoned Bubbles. Even after Jackson's death, however, the Jackson's estate have continued to pay for Bubbles' support. In addition to that, the Jackson estate also have given generous gifts to help the sanctuary expand. In 2010, LaToya visited Bubbles as part of the Untold story documentary and had a very emotional reunion with him. She believes that Bubbles recognized her, and this is a claim that was supported by the founder, as chimpanzees are known to be very intelligent animals. And even Bob Dunn himself said that Bubbles definitely missed Jackson when they parted and will miss him now. They remember people. Perhaps one of the most disturbing things to come out of all of this was a newspaper article in the Times of India in December 2003 that claimed that Bubbles had attempted to end himself and was rushed to hospital just in time after hearing about the owner's charges of CA. It is also claimed that the chimp tried to harm himself after hearing about his owner's death. The sanctuary where Bubbles now lives have never told Bubbles about Jackson's death, and they say that he wouldn't even understand if they tried to. They claim that there is absolutely no truth in these stories and they are absolutely ridiculous. Interestingly, Bubbles is now a painter. He sold 5 of his paintings for £577 each to raise cash for his ape sanctuary in 2017. So the Jackson estate obviously highly dispute the claims of wrongdoings to any of the animals under his care, and it is impossible to know whether Jackson intentionally ever physically hurt Bubbles, as these allegations remain unproven without any photographic evidence and only the testimonies of what people have said. It is, however, never recommended that chimps be kept as pets in the first place, and is actually illegal in many locations for the very good reasons as to why Micheal ended up having to give Bubbles away. What do you think? Please consider donating to the Great Centre for Apes where Bubbles is now located.